everyone, Tristan back with another video, and in this video let's talk about how to optimize the Sony MDR Z1R headphones. As many of you know, these have been my favorite headphones for the last few years. They still remain one of my top headphones, if not the top, and I just really like the sound signature of them. Straight out of the box they do sound great, and they don't necessarily need any optimizing in terms of EQ or anything like that, but I do think you can make them a little bit better if you have EQ available to you. Now the other thing to realize here is that I have the Sony Kimber cable here, which I've talked about in other videos before. This is a pure copper cable, which does tend to warm up the sound a bit with these headphones. The stock cable from Sony is a silver-plated copper cable, which does tend to sound a little bit more brittle in the highs. So that is something to note as well. Speaking in general terms about EQ, I do think most headphones can benefit from a little bit of EQ. I don't like to do very much, I don't like to go crazy, but I like to study the frequency responses of different headphones, and where they have problems, either peaks in the treble or something like that, I like to bring that down a little bit, and if they're lacking a little bit in other areas or something like that, I like to bring that up a little bit. You know, a lot of headphones can benefit from bass boost, for instance. But anyway, let's go to the computer and I can show you what I do for these. I don't do much, but I do a little bit of EQing on these, and by doing that I get a really awesome sound, just a nice sort of smooth sound signature with great mids, great bass, and great highs. And for me, EQing the Z1Rs just goes like that extra mile to make them sound really sweet and euphonic. Okay, hopefully you can see this here. I am in Roon, and Roon has a great EQ actually, very high quality. So I go to the DSP settings here, and I've got a preset for the ZR1s, and let's go to the Parametric EQ here. And I only have two bands set up. The first one is a frequency of 9900 hertz, basically 10 kilohertz, and because that's where the peak is on these headphones, and I basically bring the gain down on that to 1 dB with a Q number of 3, and that's this one here on the right. You can kind of see that. So it's just dipping down at about 10 kilohertz by about 1 dB. And then band 2 is I bring up 5,000 hertz or 5 kilohertz up by 1 dB with a Q number of 2. Now you can play around with the Q number. The Q number basically means how wide of the band it's going to affect. So the higher the Q number, the more narrow frequencies you're going to affect, whereas the lower the Q number, it's going to be a more narrow, a more wide, sort of gradual change. That's sort of the presence region, the vocal presence region, and I get a really sweet sound with this setup. Also, using the pure copper Sony Kimber cables does help warm up the headphones a bit as well, versus something like the stock cable, which is a silver-plated copper cable, which tends to sound a little bit more brittle. And with these settings, I get a really awesome sound signature that, in my opinion, really rivals anything by like Odyssey, with a better bass as well, with a more deep, impactful, and booming bass as well. But yet at the same time, I'm not boosting bass with EQ or anything. So the built-in, bass boost on the Sony Z1R headphones does not really interfere with the mids or anything like that. It just provides a nice tone. So a lot of people listen to the Sony Z1R headphones and they say, oh, it sounds a little bit brittle in the highs and maybe a little lacking in the upper mids, and that is true. If you're listening to them totally stock with the stock cables, it is still a nice involving listen, but yeah, that is true, you do hear that. But when you EQ it, it just makes the headphones sound really perfect, in my opinion. So play around with these settings. I'd be interested to hear if you EQ your Sony Z1Rs, but I thought I would do this video because a lot of people have asked how I do EQ them. And really using these settings sweetens them up quite a bit, and it really gives it a nice sort of smooth, awesome sound signature, in my opinion. I'll see you again in my next video.